Welcome to Constitutional Law Series, Episode 4. Today, we are continuing our discussion on the history of Indian Constitution. Kindly watch Part 1 to the video to get a segue into today's topic. The timeline of Part 2 is between 1938 and 1950. The very first demand for a constituent assembly was put forward by M.N. Roy in 1935. This fueled the zeal of Indian National Congress and led to several discussions at INC sessions. Although British paid no attention or importance to this demand, INC would initiate several attempts to garner support for this. In a heightened state of sentiment, Pandit Nehru modifies the need for a constituent assembly with an element of adult franchise in 1938. This statement of Nehru set the momentum for a widespread insistence for a constituent assembly imbibed with this democratic element. The onset of Second World War was a major point in the constitutional history of India. The British had arbitrarily pulled Indians into this war, which deeply upset the Indian leaders. As the Allied powers were suffering from many reverses, there was a change of government in Britain. In the state of utter chaos, British wanted the Indian support in this war. This need was bartered with the August Offer. This document marks the right of Indians to frame their own constitution. The August Offer featured a representative institution, granting dominion status to India, setting up a war advisory council, expansion of Viceroy's Executive Council with more Indian representation, and protection of minority rights. However, the August Offer failed to appease the Indian faction. While the Congress rejected the offer due to disagreement on dominion status, Muslim League rejected the document due to absence of points on granting a separate state of Pakistan. Of all, being utterly disappointed with the British gimmick, Mahatma Gandhi called for an individual satyagraha. The failure of August Offer and the effect of individual satyagraha burdened the British administration to render a solution to this Indian problem. By the end of 1941, the Japanese forces had begun to knock at the door of India. This angered the Indians and weakened British leadership in India. Amid this political belligerence, British War Cabinet sent Cripps Mission in 1942. To grant dominion status to India and obtain Indian cooperation in the Second World War. At this juncture, Roosevelt administration had wanted Britain to leave India along the lines of Atlantic Charter, but Churchill was against any condescension against Indians. The Cripps Mission featured dominion status for India, forming a constituent assembly with only Indians, right of provinces to secede, and control of India's defense until the end of war. The Cripps Mission as well failed to gather the support of Indians. Mahatma Gandhi exclaimed that Cripps Mission was a post-dated check drawn on a failing bank. Both the Congress and Muslim League reiterated the same demand as put forward during the rejection of August Offer. The Cripps Mission was infamously known to be against the unity and integrity of the country. By now, the Indian leaders had gotten extremely restless with these fruitless delegations of the British, and at this point begins the Quit India movement. A change of leadership in United Kingdom became a vital reason for the success of India's independence movement. The Labour Party won in the general election to the Parliament in United Kingdom, with Clement Attlee becoming the Prime Minister, replacing the British statesman, soldier and writer Winston Churchill of the Conservative Party. With this, the hopes for Indian independence rose up. Apart from this, the political environment in India got extremely complicated for the British to administer. Clement Attlee initiated the Cabinet Mission to India in 1946 with a plan to transfer power to Indian government. The Cabinet Mission plan featured granting independence to India, a division of provinces, formation of a constituent assembly, a powerful central government, and representation for minority groups. The Cabinet Mission plan, although not a complete success, the tune set for the formation of a constituent assembly did take steam. Very soon, the Viceroy initiated the creation of an interim government and that of a constituent assembly. The year 1946 recorded several developmental spurts with the sole intention of making a constitution. The Constituent Assembly sat for the first time in December 1946. It is around this time that Nehru introduced the famous Objective Resolution in the Assembly, laying down the philosophy of the Indian Constitution. The Objective Resolution goes on to become an important milestone in writing the preamble to the Constitution of India. The Objective Resolution of Nehru was unanimously accepted by the Assembly. Around this time, the British Parliament decided to leave India after transferring power. And then comes the Mountbatten Plan, which divided the country into India and Pakistan. With this new development, there was a change in the number of members in the Constituent Assembly. But it did not negatively impact the very purpose of this body. The British government passed the most crucial Indian Independence Act in 1947, which gave the Constituent Assembly a sovereign status. The act also elevated the Assembly with powers to make laws for the country. So, one Assembly itself had to frame a constitution and also make laws for the country. To better the allocation of departments, the Assembly made committees. One such committee is the Drafting Committee. This was a 7-member body entrusted with the sole purpose of writing a constitution for India under the chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The very first draft of the Indian Constitution was prepared in the early part of 1948. The document was made available to the Indian public for debates, revisions, and suggestions. After a period of 8 months, all the responses were taken into consideration in the making of the second draft towards the end of 1948. By the end of 1948, the document had been presented by Nehru in 2 separate reading sessions. These reading sessions were conducted for the Assembly members to discuss, deliberate, and recommend changes to this document. After the third reading in 1949, on November 26, the Constituent Assembly passed and adopted the Constitution of India. This day is celebrated as Constitution Day in India to commemorate the historical adoption of this document. The Constitution of India came into enforcement in its complete form on January 26, 1950. This date was specially chosen because it was on this day in 1930 that Pandit Nehru had hoisted the tricolour and demanded for Purna Swaraj. The Constitution of India is a labour of 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. In its original form, the Constitution was written in Hindi and English by Prem Bihari Narayan. The original manuscript of the document was decorated and designed by Acharya Nandalal Bose along with his disciple Ram Manohar. And with this, we have come to the end of our discussion on tracing the history of Indian Constitution. In the upcoming episode, we will be discussing the preamble of the Constitution of India.